things started. Welcome to our AMA, Xuntos AMA. This evening we have two special guests joining us, Moj and Simona. I'm going to introduce them in a sec, but first of all, I'm just going to outline the format of the session. So the first half of the session, I'm going to introduce our two guests, Moj and Simona. They're going to talk about who they are, what they do. And then at the second half of the session, we're going to open the floor up to live question and answers. So it's an opportunity for you to ask any questions you have to our guest. So the AMA is just a chance for you to ask any question you have about life as a developer and transitioning from a student to a working adult in the technology industry. So if you don't know already, my name's Andre. I am one part of Xuntos. So yeah, let's get started. So let's start with Simona. Simona, welcome to the AMA.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Shall we just get started and just introduce yourself? So say where you're working, what you're working as, and what products you create.
Yeah, cool. So my name is Simona Stojanović. I'm currently working at the app business, also called Tab. I work as an associate Android engineer, and in Tab, we are practically a consultancy that does work with a lot of different clients, and what we provide are basically services, the majority being apps. Yeah, that's it.
Cool, thanks, Simona. And welcome, Moj.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Moj, can you introduce yourself? So where you're working, what you're working as, and what products are you creating?
Sure. So currently I'm working as a contractor. I'm working for an agency very similar to Tab. They're called Navoda. And you may, if you're interested in Android, they host a Londroid monthly meetup. So you may know them from there. I'm currently working for one of their clients. It's currently under NDA, so I'm not sure how much I can divulge about the client, but it's within the sort of automotive space. So I haven't been there for too long. I've only been contracting now for maybe a month. So yeah, that's about me.
Oh, thank you. So that was the introductions. What I'm going to do now is just ask you a couple of questions about who you are and what you're doing. So I'm going to ask a question, and then it would be nice if both of you can answer it. And if it's a specific question, then I'll just answer it straight to you. So my first question is, what was your journey in becoming a software developer? How did you get where you are today? Simona, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. So for me, it's a bit of a weird one. I've always been quite interested in computer science, but for some reason, for my own love of languages, I went to something sort of like a specific language high school. And then going to university, I realized that I love that, but I want to do a bit more of computer science. So I went to a uni that was kind of because it was a uni in Eastern Europe, it works a bit differently. It was like a mixture of 4 years of computer science mixed with like business, marketing, and other business related subjects. After university, I kind of made a bit of a break, and I did other things like video game tournament management and organization. So that was kind of a different leap. And then after a few years, I decided that I would actually like to go back to my computer science. So yeah, I just took like a year and tried to get back on track, because obviously if you spend like a few years without anything to do with computer science and everything that comes up, you lose a lot. So it takes some time to get back to it. And yeah, after a year of just trying to refresh everything, I started applying, and that's how I ended up at TAB.
Great. Cool, thank you. And what about yourself, Moj?
Well, yeah, I got into it pretty much by accident. I sort of started out originally sort of interested in film and photography and stuff like that. So I used to do music videos a long time ago. A big part of what I enjoyed about that was the editing part. I really enjoyed sort of, spending hours sort of looking at the clips, and I felt like I had a really strong eye for detail. But I couldn't really see myself doing that as a proper career, just because at that particular time I was doing music videos for local artists. So I couldn't really think of a way to, I guess at the time, monetize that properly. So I wanted to do like a traditional type of career. Um, so I tried really hard to be like an electrician and to try and get an apprenticeship as an electrician. And I couldn't. I got rejected a lot because I was pretty old. I think I was like 21, 22, applying for these apprenticeship roles when generally people applying for that were a bit younger. I don't know if that was the reason why I found it difficult. Maybe I was just really bad, or I wasn't good at the interviews. But I guess to try and give myself a bit more leverage whilst interviewing, I went to college, and I initially wanted to do like a sort of an electrician type course, so that when I do apply for apprenticeships, I do have something sort of to give me that leverage. Um, so doing that, I met a course tutor called John Pierre, and this was in Lambeth College, and he recommended that actually, you could maybe do something a little bit more. Why don't you look at the electronics course? Um, and sort of doing the electronics course, I found again like I was really good at putting circuits together and the circuit diagrams, putting them all together. Um, and even then, I still didn't have much experience sort of or exposure to programming. Um, so again, I was still applying for electrician roles. I couldn't get anything. It was reaching sort of the end of that course, and most people in my class were applying for their degrees. So they were applying for university. So I also applied for university. I did a computer systems and networks engineering course. The reason why I picked that is because it sounded quite easy. I didn't actually want to go to university, and this seemed like the easiest course actually, just to do something with my life. And doing that course, sort of it was sort of mainly teaching around stuff around Cisco, and there was a module there which was C++ and Java. And yeah, I did that, and I found that it was actually really easy for me. And a lot of people in my class struggled with it. So I was like, hold on, how are you finding this difficult? This is really easy. And I always sort of used to help out people in that class, in that module. And sort of just from then, I started to become more interested in programming. And in my spare time, I wanted to put it to use. So I had an Android phone, and I just started learning how to make an Android app. So the first thing I did was make uh, like a Gumtree type clone. So it was just sort of like a buying and selling app. It was really bad, like really badly put together, but it was just something for me to do on the side and for me to, something to learn. And yeah, that was sort of my exposure into coding. Um, and yeah, I'm not sure if you want me to get into sort of the professional career side of things, or if you want to talk about that more later. Or...
We get to that in a bit later. Cool, thanks. Which leads me on to the next question. Now you're an Android developer, contracting. How did you get to, what was your first job as a official programmer, and how did you actually end up landing that job?
So yeah, I finished uni, and I had this one project which I just spoke about, that I had done. I also made like another sort of silly weather app, and basically those were the main things on my CV that I put on there to try and sort of land a job. So I didn't have industry experience. All I had was these projects to fall back on. So yeah, I applied for a lot of sort of Android developer roles, but because of my lack of experience, it was quite difficult for me to get my foot in the door. I came across an internship at Tab, at the app business, and it was for an Android developer intern. And I applied for that, and they had me come in and sort of had a little chat with me, and we ran through my, the really bad code that I'd written for the app I made. But they were really nice. They didn't really mind that. They were just really keen on my sort of enthusiasm, my sort of the fact that I did do some stuff in my own time to learn about Android, and that's sort of how I got into it. So yeah, I did the internship at the app business for a few months, and I was there for just under 2 years, and slowly sort of progressed at the app business. So I started off as an intern, then I got promoted to a junior, and then a mid, and yeah, so I worked there for a bit. And then after that, I decided to move on, and I worked at Deliveroo for just under a year. So I was at Deliveroo working in the restaurant team. I worked on the restaurant tablet app. So this is an app that sits in kitchens where restaurants can accept or reject or view live orders. So yeah, I did that. But then I found that the product itself was really simple, and sort of after maybe sort of 6 months, I wasn't really learning anything new. So I figured, what is the best way for me to gain exposure in sort of as much industries and domains as possible? And what sort of came to me was contracting. So the reason why I'm contracting is so that I can sort of stay at places for maybe 6 or 12 months and learn as much as I can, soak in as much information as I can about the domain, about the ways of working, learn more about different teams, and move on. And hopefully that way I can really develop a breadth of experience, because I still feel like there's so much I don't know. And the more I do learn, that's sort of, the more I learn, the more I realize that, I don't know stuff. And I really, I feel like I'm a drop in the, it's just a drop in the ocean of knowledge I have. So yeah, that's sort of where I'm at today.
And for those that don't know, could you explain what contracting is and how it works?
Yeah. So if you think of employment, traditionally you're a permanent employee and you have a contract with the employee and you work for them. Whereas a contractor, you have your own company. So, consider yourself a consultant, or where you go into companies and you work on behalf of your own company. So when they employ you, they don't actually employ you. They don't say we're employing Moj. They say we're employing your company, so Modroid Limited, and that's the way you go into the business. You have a bit more control in terms of the way you work. It's a bit different, the relationship that you do have with the people you work with in that sense, but in the day-to-day, it's actually not that much different. So contractually, there is some differences, but you still, you're still integrated as part of the team. You still participate as you would as a permanent employee. But generally, you're contracted out for a fixed period of time. So you may be contracted out for 3, 6, 9, 12 months at a time based on the business need.
Thanks much. Simona, what was your first technical job, and how did you land? How did you get that job?
So I am still at my first job. I still work for Tab. I've joined in January onto one of their projects, and before that, as I said, I had a bit of a break from between university and my first technical job. So I did some other things. So trying to get back to track with what I do now was kind of difficult. As I said, if you miss out even a few months, you kind of lose a lot, and it takes a while to get back because it's such a fast-paced industry. You kind of have to be in touch with everything. But what helped me a lot, but this is kind of like very specific to Android development. What helped me a lot is the Udacity Nano Degree course, which is practically done by Google, and it's probably one of the best and most and the biggest courses in Android development that you can take. It's also divided into different levels. So there is like a beginner's course, but then you also have the intermediate and advanced you can also find it online. There is like a paid version and a free version, and both pretty much have the same. It just depends on whether you get mentorship from someone from Google as well, and like an official degree at the very end. So to be honest, that was probably 70 to 80% what I did and what I prepared to get my first technical job was that specific course. So Nano Degree Udacity by Google for Android development. And yeah, it is very specific to Android. So, but anyways, for anyone who's quite interested in that, I would highly recommend it.
Would you say doing the Udacity degree really helped you to stand out when you were applying for your job?
I guess everyone was quite keen on when they would hear that I actually finished that. So I do think if you do mention it at your interviews, I think it does mean a lot, but also the basis that it gives you and the way, like the introduction to Android development that it provides, I think is super beneficial.
So spending some time just to get to know what you're applying for really does help.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Cool. What would you say, Simona, is like the biggest lessons you've taken away from your university education when it's come to coming to working in the real world?
It is quite a difficult transition, I won't lie. At least for me it was. I think you can't really compare it to anything that comes before that, like high school to uni, nowhere near that. But it is quite fun. It is quite challenging. I guess the tempo that you have once you move from university to a full-time job is probably one of the biggest differences. So it takes a while to get used to that. But I guess if you manage to find a place that you're happy with and that you manage to do what you really enjoy, then the transition won't be that difficult at all. I guess doing quite a bit of research on what you want to do, of course, and where you're going is crucial. I think figuring out, for me specifically, for example, if I compare it to TAB, doing that sort of a research and just getting the most out of the interviews that I had and asking as many questions as possible to try and form like a good picture of the place where I'm going to was crucial. But also before that, obviously before doing the interviews and everything, internships and generally work experience of any kind, whether it was related to like what I was studying, but also when I was doing something completely different, like event management, it was really crucial for me to figure out exactly what I would like to do, at least in the next 5 years or more. And also being aware of the fact that it's not that horrible and it's not that scary if you do change your mind, that even though it might seem like it's, I don't know, too late or that you should stay with what you've decided, I don't think it's that scary to just change your mind and go for it if you do change your mind on what you want to do.
Great advice. Thank you. And Moj, yourself, what's the biggest lessons you've taken away from your university time and moving into full-time work?
I guess I have a slightly skewed perspective on this. I generally haven't always been like a big fan of university itself. So even the university that I went to, I picked it because it was only 10 minutes away and it was easy to get to. So I am a very lazy sort of studier, but the main things I guess university has taught me is how to learn, that process of being able to learn and being able to understand something quickly. So, you know, you have a module that you sort of have a lot of new information thrown at you. You learn how to be organized, how to sort of write things down, take notes, study for exams. I think that sort of skill of being able to be organized is really helpful in the real world. And the act of learning and the act of having some process around how you learn is pretty good as well. So if you do sort of have, you know, even if you take university half seriously, these are skills that you will pick up. So I'd say that's probably the biggest thing that I have learned. And yeah, I mean, during uni, I kept a journal, I kept a notebook, and that's something that I still use to this day. So whenever I am sort of learning something new, I'll bring out my notepad and write it down in there. And if I didn't go to university, I probably wouldn't have picked up that habit. So yeah, I'd say that's probably the things that have sort of helped me, and those are things I've taken away from university.
Speaking of university, you kind of touched on a few points already, but what advice would you give to students in their final year about to apply for jobs? What do you think they should be doing to make sure they get the job they want and they stand out in the tough crowd?
So yeah, I would say I think generally university is a good sort of vacation period almost. It's a good time to really think about, what is it that you're interested in? What is it? What particular modules did you find really interesting, or what modules did you find that you were good at? And using those findings in your final year to try and pinpoint maybe what career you want to get into. Sometimes you study a degree and sort of actually the job you really want to do is got nothing to do with your degree. So I'd say your final year is a good time to try and isolate and hone in what is it that you actually want to do as a career, and do more research in that, and try your best to have some portfolio that could aid you when you are applying for work. So if you are sort of interested in development, it's a good time to think about maybe having a side project going in your final year. And maybe even if you can, usually most universities have like a final major project. Try and leverage that as something that you want to show to employers. So I'd say take it seriously from that point of view.
Moj, would you say having an online presence really helps? So like having your own website where you upload your portfolio and CV and everything?
I'd probably say in this day and age, it's not. It could potentially be useful, but I'd probably say maybe you can use that effort to sort of go on LinkedIn and make connections with people doing jobs similar to what you want to do. So if you want to be a software engineer, maybe try and connect with people on LinkedIn that are, let's say, iOS or Android software engineers. Potentially maybe message them, say, hey, I graduate in sort of June. Do you know if your company has any internships going, any graduate schemes going? Probably it's a better time to network, go to different meetups. And I'd say maybe having your own website could be a bit difficult for people to find. So I'd say LinkedIn is probably a better place to build a portfolio there, because generally it's easier for people to find. And if you have a good LinkedIn with a good profile and with some interesting projects on there, it's easy for you to share that with different people and different employers.
Great. So just going on LinkedIn and maybe searching any company you can think of and just looking through the list of people and contacting them.
Sure. Yeah, I don't think that would hurt. I mean, you're going to get maybe one person out of 10, maybe replying. You may get nobody reply, but I think it does build resilience in sort of rejection, and you will potentially get rejections anyway. So yeah, I'd say it doesn't hurt to see the faces that are out there. And it is a small world generally. Like if you are going to work in London, for example, there's only sort of a set number of developers that are there, and you will bump into people time and time again. So it doesn't hurt to build that network and see what sort of people are out there.
Thanks, Moj. And Simona, what advice would you give to final year students about to embark on applying for jobs?
I totally agree with Moj, to be honest, especially on the point that you have to be the one to push it in the beginning, at least. I think a lot of people that are at their final years and don't have that much of work experience have this tendency, and I've done it as well, like have this tendency of not trying to be too pushy, in a sense that they don't want to be the ones who are going to contact others. They don't want to be intense and spam people. But I honestly don't think that anyone ever really minded that. Like none of the companies would actually mind that, or people specifically on LinkedIn. Like it actually, to the contrary, I think it shows how enthusiastic and how interested you are and just making those people or those companies aware of the fact that you're available and really and interested, I don't think it ever did wrong to someone. So I think, yeah, what Moj said, pretty much like being visible on LinkedIn and trying to reach out to different people, to companies, either through LinkedIn or some meetups, and there's a bunch of them happening, not just in London, but from what I've seen, like across UK. I think that's the best way to go. And just keeping in mind that, yeah, university obviously gives you a really good basis, but in the end, it all comes down to what you want to do and how much you're willing to push for it.
Great, thank you. I have a question more aimed towards you, Simona. And the question is, what is it like being a female developer in a male-dominated industry?
It's quite interesting, I have to say. So far, I've noticed that it is a vicious cycle, for example, because having less women in this industry kind of drives to less women applying for the industry and less women being interested in something that's presented as a male-dominated industry. So it's kind of a vicious cycle that needs to be that we need to break at some point. And the best way of doing that is actually like just going for it, right? And trying to break it in any way possible, even if it's just one person doing that kind of a job. And it is a hard thing to sort of to break through, but from what I've seen, at least across London and probably the rest of UK, it's even the world, I think right now is a really good time to try and break that cycle, because I think everyone, all of the bigger names and bigger industries are kind of fighting for equality, in not just in gender terms, right? In any kind of equality. So I think right now is a good time for that. And obviously it seems a bit scary, at least it was for me, because of the way tech industry is represented. But I think once you get the opportunity to join it, I think the best way of showing breaking that cycle is actually showing what you got and just sort of pushing your limits as a woman in tech industry, and just pretty much being a good representative.
Appreciate the honest answer.
Yeah.
Are you part of like any groups or organizations that help you like get into tech more and help you progress in your career? And if you are, can you name a few?
Yeah. Right now I am a part of the Women Tech Makers, which is a massive group. It's a really good source for a lot of different materials and advice given by other female mentors that are a part of it. And they have their email newsletter, they have their Slack group, and pretty much any tech related meetup has at least a few members joining or even speaking and organizing. So that one is a pretty big one. And I to be honest, that would be my first suggestions for anyone trying to join this industry and join any like women related support groups for joining this for joining tech industry. I think that one would be my first and biggest recommendation.
Well, thank you. We're almost running out of time. We're going to give it about another 15 minutes. But I wanted to ask one or two more questions. I'll start with Moj. I guess as a closing question, if there's anything you'd want to tell students right now that they should be doing, or how to learn, because it can be overwhelming learning so many different programming languages, which platform to develop on, etc. What advice would you give them?
So I guess the first suggestion I would have is don't rely on your education. Don't rely on just what you've learned at university to get you through the door. Sometimes some people, have the misconception that university is, that degree is all you need. But there's plenty of other people with that same degree. So you have to be willing to set yourself apart. The second thing about the learning, I'm sort of a strong believer in just-in-time learning. So what that basically means is you don't really have to learn everything now. When you do come across it, then at that point you can go ahead and learn more about it, because it has a context around sort of why you're learning it, rather than just being an abstract thing that you are learning for the sake of it. And you're more than likely to forget it anyway. So I think, trying your best not to cram everything in, but again, trying to think a little bit about what sort of domain or industry you want to get into. Is it mobile? Is it front end? Is it back end? Is it project management? There's so many roles within the IT and tech industry that, I think having a good think about that, even if you are on a, let's say, computer science degree, maybe you might fit a little bit better into something else. So I think spending some time going through the job descriptions of a few different roles to see which ones resonate with you. And I'd say lastly, really try your best to have a project going on at the side, sort of on the side. So it doesn't have to be a fancy idea. It doesn't have to be an idea that makes you a billionaire or anything like that. I think just picking an idea, something that you have an interest in, or maybe you have sort of a bit of background knowledge in, try and come up with a project, try and have something going that you can sort of apply practically the experiences and the things you've learned at university towards. And it will also act as a catalyst for you to sort of reach out and do a bit more research in other avenues. And sort of, it's almost like when you go on Wikipedia and you click on one link and then you end up on another page, and then you end up on another page and another page. So that's what a project will do for you. It will allow you to sort of branch off and go down different roads that you didn't really expect to go down. And yeah, that would definitely be sort of the strongest advice I have.
Cool, thank you. And Simona, yourself, what kind of advice would you give?
I think one of the main things is to try and get a good balance of research, really, really good research, trying to figure out obviously what you want to do, because I think there's a big misconception that a lot of people come to university or even finish university knowing 100% what they want to do. I think that's only just a handful of people that are completely sure. I think there's a lot more of us who kind of struggle to find their path, even at a later point in their time. So that's the reason why I don't think anyone should be scared of changing their mind at any point in their lives. But I do think that getting good work experience or internships, or even, as Moj said, like doing stuff on your own in your free time and just experimenting, I think it's the best way to kind of invest your time out of like typical university classes. Just invest your time into figuring out what you want to do exactly, and even if that changes throughout, then that's cool, because you'll know a bunch of different interesting stuff, and it's gonna somehow pay off at a certain point in time. Even if you find a tech related job, knowing different languages or even playing like an instrument is gonna pay off at any point in time. So I do think like a good combination of research and then hands-on experience is amazing. But also I think it's really important to not let yourself burn out, in the sense that especially when you're studying, you kind of get overwhelmed with how much you don't know, and that kind of goes on. But I think that beginning is crucial. So I think not being overwhelmed, but also allowing yourself some time to kind of continue doing your hobbies and just having something to blow off steam is also really, really important. And I think especially in the beginning, people tend to forget that because they really just want to go nuts with like learning as much as they can and spending a lot of time investing into something, even though they love it. Like even though you do something that you love, I think having a hobby that can kind of relax you a bit is also really, really important. So yeah, I guess it's like a mixture of smaller advices.
Oh, no, so like from what I gained from both of you, like the common thing was like have a small little side project just to learn a few things and really figure out what exactly you want to do. Cool. Yeah, well, thank you, Simona and Moj, for answering my questions. Now I want to open the floor up to anyone that's listening. Feel free to post in the group chat any questions you might have for Moj and Simona, and we'll get them answered for you. Or if you have your mic, feel free to just shout out your questions as well. We'll have about 10 minutes for Q&A. All right, so you can't use your mics, but you can use the group chat. So feel free to just write in the group chat any question you have. So it can be any question. It doesn't matter. It can be a stupid question or a really complex one. Doesn't matter. Okay, so we have a few questions. Okay, maybe Simona, you can answer this one, and Moj, I'll get you to answer the next one. So Simona, what is one piece of advice that you would give your younger self about working in the tech industry?
That it's not that scary. To be honest, I was really scared when I started out, and I had a big problem with the imposter syndrome. I still think I do. I think that's a very thing to kind of move away from. But essentially, for the first 2 or 3 months, I kept having these crises where I would definitely think that I wouldn't be able to pull it off. That took some time to kind of get away from it, but obviously I think like the first few months of trying to do anything is always like the crucial one. So if you kind of survive those initial few crises, then it gets easier. It's still obviously something to kind of keep in mind because it does come back from time to time, but I would say that it's not that scary. I think that applies pretty much for the same industry, but those first few steps are always the most difficult one.
Thank you. And we had another question for Moj. So Moj, what steps did you take to become a contractor?
Yeah, so it actually isn't very difficult to become a contractor. I think the market is employing contractors at different skill levels. So there is sometimes a misconception that you have to be sort of a leading industry expert to be a contractor, but it's not always the case. Different businesses have different needs. Sometimes they might want somebody at a mid-level or sometimes a senior level to come in as a contractor. Generally less so for a junior level. But I think if you've been doing it for 2 years, 2 years minimum, you probably won't have much trouble getting a gig or two. So the steps actually obviously include resigning from your permanent job. Generally, contracts, they require people to come in quite quickly. So you might find that you might have a notice period of 2 months or 1 month, and that in itself could pose a difficulty to making a transition to becoming a contractor. So I think, yeah, having the commitment that you do want to do it and resigning without having a job lined up may potentially sort of be a showstopper for some people. You may also be lucky and find a contract that are willing to wait for you if you have a lengthy notice period. So I'd say, yeah, once you've sort of quit your job and you've got an offer for a contract, at that point, it's probably a good idea to start thinking about forming your company, hiring an accountant. Generally, there's a lot of services out there that sort of do everything for you. So do a little bit of research, ideally before sort of around your phase of thinking about contracting, do some research about what sort of firms are out there and how much that costs per month. And yeah, once you've got your company formed and you have an accountant, then all you really need to do is sort of get that contract signed and begin working. There are sort of a few issues around sort of tax and VAT and some basic stuff you might want to know about running a business. It's very helpful to know. So that's something you can also learn along the way. But generally speaking, it's not as difficult as it may seem. So there's so many people in the industry who have done it. There are plenty of forums online where you can do some research and ask questions. So I found that particularly helpful, sort of just lurking a few forums and seeing what people in the past have asked and learning from their mistakes.
Thanks. Is there any particular website you would recommend to look into this, or just Google search is fine?
I'd say Google search is fine. There is I forget the name of it. If you just type in IT contracting, there is a popular one that pops up. I forget the full name of it, but yeah, apart from that, there are actually a few YouTube videos you can go on as well. And there are a lot of people that have talked about making the transition between permanent and contracting. And you may also find that actually after a few years, you don't want to contract anymore. Maybe you want to go back to permanent. So it's good to get a understanding of the motivations for why people get into contracting and why maybe they might want to come out of contracting, and do a little bit of thinking around your motivations around that. I think it's quite helpful.
Cool. Thanks, Moj. I'm going to have one more. I'm going to ask one more question before we wrap this up. So this is to Moj and Simona. Maybe Moj, you can go first. So the question is, how is the work environment that you work in? What's it like to work in tech, and what do you kind of do?
So again, I'm still learning, sort of specifically around this question, and that's again another reason why I have gone contracting, and that's for me to learn more around what it is like to work in different types of companies and different types of organizational structures, and for me to really try and pick up, what is the differences between these different companies. So I found, working at Tab is very different to working at Deliveroo, to working at my current contracting company. But I think one common theme around all of them is that, you will be surrounded around smart people that are generally motivated and have a passion for what they do. So that's always a good thing, that you're working with people that enjoy what they do. And in terms of issues in the industry, I'd say tech as an industry itself is very progressive. So you do find that if there are sort of any big issues, it's something that people are generally happy to speak about and to speak up on. I think depending on the type of organization you're in, you'll find different problems. So working in a startup has a very different set of problems associated around it, as opposed to working in a bigger unicorn type company, where sort of they have now had to be a bit more process driven, a bit more conscious of hierarchy and management. So it's a very difficult question to answer, but I'd say generally it's a good industry to be in, and there isn't any pressing issues, in my opinion.
Thank you, Moj. Simona, how's it like for you working in the environment, and do you face any issues?
It is a super fast-paced environment, so it requires a lot of proactiveness from everyone who's in it. So probably like it requires a lot of effort into keeping yourself updated. So I guess like a lot of different approaches to like keeping yourself informed, different resources and different materials and news that you can sort of try and keep up with. So I guess that would be like a very important thing to bear in mind when you join this industry. But other than that, is my experience so far is because it's such a fast-paced industry and because it requires a constant learning, you will run into a lot of people that are open for mentoring you and pretty much teaching you. And that is really, it's a big support that you can get, especially if you're just starting out. And I think it's really amazing how much people are open to spending a lot of time and effort into helping others and kind of helping their progress. I guess I was expecting that, but not as much as not as much as it in fact is. I was kind of surprised as to how open people are in terms of that. And other than that, it's been, for me so far, it's been really amazing, and I haven't run into any specific issues, I have to say. Probably takes some time before I do, and before it kind of starts unwrapping. But yeah, so far, I just think the biggest plus is how open people are to sharing knowledge.
Wonderful. Thank you, Simona. And yeah, thank you, Moj, as well. We're just going to wrap this up now. It's been a pleasure speaking to you both. I hope you enjoyed it. I did.
Yep.
Yeah,
Thanks for having me.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Simona and Moj. Let's say a massive thank you to them for taking time out of their evening to come and chat to us and give us a real insight into their evening. Before we go, where can we find you guys? Are you on Twitter, LinkedIn?
LinkedIn, yeah. I'm on LinkedIn. You can find me Simona Stojanović. The spelling is a bit awkward, but yeah, I can write it down.
We'll add it to the chat or something.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, likewise, you can find me at Moj. So if you search for Moj, I probably will come up. I don't know if anybody else is called Moj in London. I don't know. If not, if you type Mojroid, Mojroid, you'll also be able to find me.
Thank you. So to everyone who's watching, good night. To Moj and Simona, good night. Hope to see you guys soon. Take care.
Take care. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.